I am Catherine Cadman Crosby, and I left the Kingston polygamous cult when I was 15 years old. I left in 1979. When I was 13, two things happened that really troubled me. The first was that someone close to me married one of Artel's sons, and he was being abusive to her. Um, my stepdad talked to Artel and was concerned about this. And so Artel knew about it. Then at young people's meeting, we got to ask an anonymous question, any anonymous question. So my anonymous question was, what should you do if your spouse is being abusive to you? So Artel got up at that young people's meeting and he said my question and laughed and said, this never happens in the order. So I'm like, this man is not a prophet. This man knows this is happening because Stewart has talked to him about it and he doesn't care. And so I didn't feel safe anymore. And then the second thing that happened was one of my cousins, who was just a baby, died of pneumonia. During that time, Artel had been fasting for cancer, whatever it was he thought he had. And I was told that that baby had to pay the price so Artel could stay. That baby just needed antibiotics. So this beautiful, healthy baby died, and I got to see my aunt bury another child. And that really bothered me. And with the mental illness that I have that I didn't know I had at that point, I know now it was a matter of, you're not safe here. So I was 13. I had no way of getting out. I didn't know how I would get out, but I knew that I would. So when I was 15, I had an opportunity to leave, and I did. When I was 15, I got pregnant and wanted to marry the father of my child, who was an outsider. Mom wanted me to talk to Artel, but I didn't want to talk to Artel because I knew Artel didn't care about her or me. But she asked if I would talk to Grandpa Clyde, and of course I would talk to Grandpa Clyde because I loved Grandpa Clyde and I knew he loved me too. So we went to talk to him, and Grandpa Clyde told me, "You're doing the right thing. Go and don't look back." My mom was devastated. She could not believe that he would say that to me. But she signed the papers and allowed me to marry who I married. And I was out. I mean, they did, before I talked to Grandpa Clyde, people from the order would come and talk to me all hours of the day into the night. I was restricted to home for 2 weeks. I wasn't allowed to go to work. I wasn't allowed to use the phone. And they told me, if you leave the order, this baby will be doomed because, the baby will be cast out in heaven, but any children you have in the order won't be. And how important it was that I stay in the order and do the right things. And I was even offered my sister's husband as an option so that I felt like I had an option to stay. And any children I had with him would be saved, even though this first baby would be a cast off. So I left. After Grandpa said, "Go and don't look back," I did. So my book is called Voices from Inside. It's a memoir in verse. And my kids have asked me for a long time to write my story. And every time I try to write it, I just get too depressed. So I decided to write it in verse because you can handle trauma a little bit at a time. In verse means that it's like poems. So there is some prose in it that gives a little bit of family history, a little bit of history of the order, but all the way through it's because you can read something really hard and then move on to something a little lighter without completely destroying or triggering all of those feelings. I hope that my book will help people who have either suffer from mental illness, who have been in traumatic situations, who people who have left the order or other cults, um, people who have ever wondered if they're enough. I hope this book will help them be able to find their voice and be able to show that they are enough, that we're all enough just as we are. The first day after it was released, I got contacted by somebody that wanted information on how to leave the FLDS. And so I went back in, and of course, this copy doesn't have it, and the first few copies that have been ordered won't, but I added a resource page for ways that people can get help. So I was kind of surprised to get feedback that fast. So you can get my book on Amazon. It is free if you have Kindle Unlimited. It's $4.99 for the ebook or $14.99 for the paperback is where you can find my books. And so I hope that it will help people. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize about the Cadman girls is that the order was the good part of our childhood. And what came before the order was worse than the order. And the order's rough. And I remember when I left the order and then when other people would leave and they were such a mess and they had to do all this therapy, and I'm like, well, order wasn't that bad. But my experience in the order wasn't the same as somebody who was one of, say, Daniel's kids or Paul's kids. It's not the same situation. We weren't exposed to the same things. We were relatively safe with Mom and Deward. And we didn't face a lot of those same things. Now, I feel like I'm processing religious trauma now that I never did process years ago because I was working through everything that happened with my dad. And he died a couple of years ago, which has helped. To know that he's no longer in the world, I won't run into him, has been helpful. It's sad. When my mom was a little girl, back in the early days of the order, I think she was maybe 7, one of her uncles allowed a man who was homeless to come and stay with them. He felt bad for him. This was during the Depression, and things were hard. And this man raped my mom and probably other little girls in the order too, I would imagine, because people that do that don't just target one. She didn't dare tell anybody. And it just wore on her till she finally dared to tell her mom, Grandma Arlene. And her uncle, as soon as he found out, of course, threw this man out. But in those times, nothing, you didn't press charges or anything. You just got rid of the offender. There was no counseling or anything. So Mom was in love with someone in the order. And it was her mom's dying wish that she marry Artel the same as her 2 older sisters had. So she did. Broke up with the person that she wanted to marry, married Artel, but because she had been raped, she couldn't bring herself to consummate the marriage. She didn't feel that she was worthy of being with the prophet. And so she tried really hard, too, to be able to consummate that marriage. She told me that she finally decided, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to, she fixed herself up. She fixed her bed all up. He came over and she ran out. And he didn't come back. So that was that. When she met my dad and wanted to marry him, Grandma Vesta and Grandpa Charles arranged for her to have an annulment from Artel because they were worried about her salvation. Yeah, it was an annulment of her spiritual marriage to Artel, 'cause, of course, they were never legally married. 'Cause, there's not that many legal marriages in the order, comparatively. If someone has 30 wives, only one of those is going to be legal. She had an annulment and married my dad and had some very happy years until my grandpa, my dad's father, died. And then he had a friend come back from Vietnam that he started using drugs with. And then everything in our life became a nightmare. So when Mom left him, right, it was about 6 weeks before I turned 7, she went home to the order. And that was when we started our journey of being completely indoctrinated. I don't feel like Artel ever forgave her, and he spent his life making her life and our life hard, which is why I think nothing was ever done about that rumor about us being Black, but it protected us. So, because of how racist the order is, it kept us safe. But then again, like I was telling you, I thought it was funny when LaDonna noticed my beautiful little blonde-haired, blue-eyed, piano-playing daughter and had to comment on, "Oh, she's so talented, she's so beautiful," and I'm just like, you know, "Back off." And she is going to be a doctor in May. So now I am a school teacher. I teach middle school students how to be confident readers. I have, my husband and I have 7 kids between us. We have 14 grandkids. My life is so good. Like, it's so wonderful. I just published my memoir about my life, and life is just good. I travel, I garden, I just have every good thing. I think I'm most humbled by the fact that once upon a time, there was a 15-year-old girl with a lot of strength. I don't know that current me has the kind of strength that 15-year-old me had to get out of the order, because that took a lot. I am proud of the fact that I wrote my story and that I published my story, because I had a lot of fear surrounding that. When you grow up in the order, and then, of course, in the situation I was in before the order, and you hear those, kids aren't allowed to play with you because your dad's a drug dealer. Kids aren't allowed to play with you because you work at the co-op store. Kids aren't allowed to play with you because you're in the order, you're a polygamist. And to share all of those things that were thrown in my face for so many years, I am proud of me, and again, humbled by the strength of the 15-year-old girl that got me out of the order.